Check. 1, 2, 3.
The D. Brief. This is the D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit.
Your guide to Detroit's
arts and entertainment scene.
This is the D
Brief.
Hello and welcome to the Debrief, your podcast for Detroit's arts and entertainment. I am your co-host. My name is Seth Ressler.
And I'm Becky Scarcello.
All right, Becky, you know these sculptures that you see all over Detroit. They're these orange men, they wear fedoras, and they're on top of buildings everywhere. You've seen them. They've been around for a while,
right?
The
man in the city.
Yes. So we have the guy behind that
here
exciting. With us on the podcast today. How cool is that?
I know.
So we're going to find out what all these guys are doing, because I'm a little concerned that they might be spying on me. I'm not really sure. We're going to find out today. He is sculptor and artist John Sauvé. He is, like you said, the guy behind the Man in the City experience, and also the guy behind the Sauvé Art Foundation. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I'm here.
Yay.
Oh, this is exciting.
I know.
So, people have seen these all over the place. Tell us about the origin of this particular this piece.
No, thanks, Seth. Actually, it's 10 years now, and it was really the outgrowth of a fundraiser I was at in New York back in 2008. I was talking to the executive director, and he was saying something about some artwork that was on display and how there was no arts programming that summer. And because everything was down, it was the economy, everything was heading downhill, and the first thing that gets cut is arts programming. So I said, if I can come up with something, a 2-week program for your kids in the city of Manhattan, would you buy into it? And he said yes. Who do you think won on that deal?
Right.
2 weeks in the city. Yeah,
with
suckers.
Kids.
Yeah, they got stuck with me for 2 weeks. So it was a great experience. And what we did, we installed 24 of these orange men on the High Line, which had just opened up. And it's New York City's most popular attraction. It's their most recent public park. It's an old elevated railway line they converted into this public park. And it was also one of the roughest neighborhoods in the city that was completely transformed through art with this High Line and with the art that came afterwards. And the two guys that actually started the High Line, they met at a community meeting, and the idea was it was a done deal. They were going to tear it down and get rid of it. And they said,
wow.
Wait a minute, this is our history. This is, there's so many things that have happened on, near, or around this High Line, and we think we should keep it. And that really screwed up the mayor's plans. And all of a sudden, other people said, yeah, why are we doing that? And now it is one of the top building locations in the city of Manhattan. And I caught those guys early. We became friends. And so when this opportunity came to do a public art project, I said, let's do it on the High Line. And they said, we hadn't thought about that, but sure. So it became the first public art project on the High Line.
That is amazing. And where did the idea of the man come from? The whole look of it.
Oh, I had been working with this image, and it was usually a bunch of silk screens, and I had another image, and I always had this orange man as a shadow. And so I always thought of him as, everybody's doing what you guys are doing, working during the day, and maybe you got the shadow, and maybe it happens to be, the man is your shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Becky, you might not understand this because Seth is more paranoid, as he said
well,
early on in
clearly,
the conversation. He thinks they're all looking at him.
That's his general vibe.
That's why this probably might relate a little better to him because paranoid.
Right. You wouldn't know what it's like to have creepy men,
wait a second.
at you all the time.
Excuse me,
that's a different thing.
That's
true.
thing.
Yeah, you
That's
probably
a
do
different
see
thing.
shadowy characters around. So I am so sorry for alienating you from the conversation.
No,
It's the paranoia that got me.
But I look more at the men in the city and go, let's be friends. What's your story, man?
Hey, fella. How long you been in town, sailor?
What's going on?
I like this podcast.
Yes.
Okay, so then fast forward, how does it get to Detroit?
Well, it was up for the summer. I took it down. I came back, and at the time, two friends of mine had a place called U Detroit Cafe for a brief period in Harmony Park. They're two producers that worked with everyone from Aretha Franklin to Eminem. It's the Pastoria brothers.
Right.
And a buddy of mine brought me in there and said, you got to meet these guys. So I go in, and I'm telling Brian about the project, and he goes, put one on my building. I'm like, damn it, I don't really have a plan. I got no money for this. I don't have okay. And I came back the next day, we put one up, and then all of a sudden the plan was to bring it to the city, but it just got escalated because Brian said, hey, let's get this done. And
Okay,
then,
so you said the next day, like you just had one
no,
in your garage?
the next day.
Like
well,
you're
I
there,
had
what?
I had them on the High Line for a brief period.
Oh, you
and all my
took
friends
them
came
back.
home with me. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Becky?
Yes.
It was raining men. It
Oh.
was time for them to get out of my...
Hallelujah.
Yeah, I knew you would
So
like that.
it was either put it up on rooftops or Craigslist, right? I mean, is
Right,
that
or
what-
actually,
garage sale,
the
or
living room, the backyard.
yeah.
So,
make a circle of
Yeah.
men. Now that would be sort of creepy.
Yeah.
though. Yeah.
But let me ask, does this guy have a name?
there have been several names for him, but I don't have a personal name for him. I have a name for the project, and one of the ideas behind it, and I have to back up a little bit, how we ended up on top of buildings is I'm working with these kids in the city. We're installing them on the High Line, and one of them says, wouldn't it be great if you put them up on buildings? And I'm like, that's a really good idea. And then when Brian
Out
said,
of the mouths of babes.
oh, it was
Always,
great.
yeah.
So really, it's always been a community art project. That's how I've always looked at it. And I've worked with everything from kids to seniors. Everybody has a perspective. And this is nothing more than a conversation starter. I mean, public art is everything to me, but what I've got from this project personally from the city of Detroit, it's the only way to fully know your city is to go talk to people. And I think
For
art
sure.
happens to be one of the best ways to do that. So
Has the city been, at least, especially at the beginning, did they embrace it? Were they open to it? Were they like, you want to do what?
oh, was I supposed to ask them?
Yeah,
I knew there was something I was forgetting.
I'm thinking about the timing too, Seth. 10 years ago, like whatever, go do stuff.
Right,
You know,
you
it was a
could-
different.
It can't be replicated.
No,
Right.
Yeah.
no.
And people have tried and failed miserably. I actually am friends with a lot of people from the city. Through the project, I think I have a pretty good understanding of what's happening, and I feel very much a part of it. I have a studio right downtown, and I happened to be at the mayor's house probably 2 years ago, and I have pictures of his cooler that says Duggan. He used black magic marker to prove it, Seth, in case you were wondering if I was actually there.
I believe you.
So, no, it's opened up all these opportunities.
Yeah.
Detroit is such a welcoming place,
Yes.
and everybody knows everybody, and it seems like a big high school to me.
Right.
It's a great place and a lot of welcoming and really loving and caring people. And we're going to talk about some of those people coming up, but it's like I've grown up here. I was born here. My whole family's been here for a couple generations, and I'm really proud to be a part of what's going on right now.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. How do you
So-
choose the buildings that the men go on, or does it choose you?
Well, it was a little of both because I have been working in public art now since probably 1984. I worked with the state of Michigan's Art and Public Places, which was located in the city of Detroit. And so I spent a couple years there. So I had a pretty good introduction to what public art existed in the city as well as the state because we were documenting at the time all the public holding of artwork. So that was a great intro. I had an art history degree, and so I knew, this is something I really want to do. And then fast forward a couple years, pay off some debts, have a couple other jobs, that kind of thing, and then I'm like, what am I doing with my life? So I had to jump into all of this, and this is just one of the ideas that was born out of opportunity. So.
Like all the best ideas are.
I think so.
Yeah.
But, you were asking me how did I choose some of this things. I have been working with and been members of a lot of arts organizations. And so I went to my favorite nonprofits first because I thought, if nothing else, this could help bring attention to that nonprofit, which I would say informal survey. Everyone has said it has been beneficial to draw attention to their groups.
Sure.
And everyone, whenever I do a tour, people ask me or something, it's just funny. I've got so much time put into each location. I just walk in. We usually go to the roof. We have access to everything. I have the best views of the city of Detroit.
So jealous.
And access to the best views.
Yes.
But, you're coming with me in a couple of weeks, aren't you?
Okay, yes.
That's right. You're going on the tour.
There's a tour, yeah. Our friend Seth Bailey Sisoy Iskro of
yeah,
Detroit
she's on
History
the
Tours.
podcast all the time.
Yeah, so she is offering a few Man in the City Experience tours, like a walking tour, and John will actually be one of the tour guides.
Oh, that's awesome. So.
Yeah. And Bailey and I have another project coming up, too, which you're going to find out probably that day about.
Oh, okay.
A
I'll
little
report
highly
back.
visible project.
So
yeah.
can you give us a preview? Like, give us a story behind one of the particular men.
So one of my favorites, which Becky's actually going to get a chance to go up and see, is on top of the Park Shelton. And number one, it's a great location, perfect view of the skyline. And where the guy is mounted on the corner of the building, it looks down at the Historical Museum, it looks at the DIA, it looks at the library, and you can see it up and down Woodward. The funny thing is they're all the exact same size, but that one, because it's so high up, it looks like it's bigger. For some reason, I don't know why. I'm not a physics guy.
Superhero status.
Don't really know, but he does look a lot bigger, and we are going to be going up on the roof to check it out from up there. But for me, the history behind the Park Shelton.
Oh, it's amazing.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
The ups and downs, like Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, they stayed there when he was painting over at the DIA. It was, I mean, it's just people, they give me the history. They stop up, and everybody you talk to wants to tell you something in relation to, and, sometimes it's very detailed, sometimes it's not, but I like to relish in that, and I always take time because I always get something out of it because they're sharing their personal experience, and that's what I get out of this. So it's great.
Nice. Let me ask you about a phrase that you've used a number of times now, public art. And I think I know what that means, but explain what that means, from an artist's point of view and from a career standpoint, but also talk a little bit about the state of public art in the Detroit area.
Well, I'm going to back up because you had mentioned about 15 years ago, I had a friend who said, you got to stop being an idiot and get a foundation because I do so many different things and get them all under one umbrella just to manage it all. And the byline for the Sauvé Art Foundation is building communities through public art. And I do that through film, and I do it through mainly large-scale sculpture. And so I provide these opportunities for people to get involved either in the project through support or for kids to use it for education or partnering with another nonprofit. But to answer your definition of public art, for the most part, film I usually slide in there, but public art for me is large-scale sculpture. It's kind of, it's not something, there's a lot of different realms with art, but for me it's usually a three-dimensional form that that's one of the things that the foundation does and I do is I curate shows. So like you mentioned Birmingham earlier. Birmingham sought me out to be the curator of their show and bring 10 pieces of sculpture to the downtown area, which are still up. And I've done that for a lot of small towns and universities and colleges, and I do it all around the Midwest.
So when you do these projects, where does the funding coming from? Is it coming from the city level?
Damn, I always forget about that part of it.
I know.
Yeah.
We need the money.
Right.
Yeah.
I assume you're eating, right? So.
Well, how could you tell, Seth? Actually, usually it is through the DDA, the Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Association, whoever feels that public art is important. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, I usually have to have a lot of conversations with them about it because it is something that brings back more than it gives, that it costs, I should say. And I'll give you a prime example of that. I have to promote. I have to tell stories. I have to be on tour. And I was at the Michigan Convention Visitor Bureau, big convention in Detroit a couple of years ago, and I'm always the stooge for public art. And there was one of the first public art projects I did was for the city of Brighton. And halfway through, they got a new community relations director who came from another area. And the city manager, it was like beating my head against the wall. And I was friends with the mayor, so that's how I got things done. But the city manager, He didn't have a clue. He still doesn't have a clue. He still doesn't really get it. But this community relation guy gets hired, and he had tried to set this up in other communities, and he knew how much work and what it took. And he goes, they don't even know what they have here. And so he was always great. We'd go to these like, I think it was at some DDA convention, hometown convention. Every time he seems to be at these different things, and it was always like clockwork. I would be doing a presentation, and I started to make sure he was around because he would yell from the audience, and it's changed our city.
Yes, on cue. Nice,
yeah, it was
nice.
it was like all set up. So I let it out of the bag. Yeah, it's like Colonel Parker, when he was like breaking all the Elvis albums and setting them on fire, protesting Elvis.
Oh yeah,
sales went up.
Exactly.
So this guy was great. Matt was a good friend, and he was always doing that, and it was always on cue, and he always offered perspective that, prior to the public art, we had no reason for people to come to the city of Brighton. Now we have public art, and people are open past 5 o'clock. There's a waiting list for new restaurants, and there's things to do. And he threw it all at public art. He said it was the reason the city had transformed.
Wow.
And
I happen to agree with him.
As well.
And
Now,
Colonel Tom Parker.
Yes.
So.
Would you include at this point murals, two-dimensional?
Oh, absolutely. No,
as
murals
the
play a big
definition
role,
of
especially
public
when we
art?
talk about Detroit.
Right.
Some of the big mural projects were the beautification project that started probably in the 2000s, and then other outcroppings came like the Grand River Creative Corridor.
Correct, yeah.
And I'm a big fan of organized mural projects. Well, I like graffiti ones too. I like
too.
unorganized ones too.
Me too.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And when you talk about art in the city of Detroit for the last 10 years, especially, it's nothing but fun.
Exactly.
Especially all the little minute stories and details, and how things came about and how things fell apart. It's so much fun.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And it's fun to see artists work together, and everyone becomes greater than the sum of the individual. It just grows and grows.
So I want to know the story behind another one of your pieces, which is a piece on the Detroit riverfront, which resembles the men, but it's
Not orange.
Not orange.
It's not orange. It's 12 feet tall,
huge.
stainless steel.
Huge. It's got tubes? Is that how you would describe it? through
Yeah,
it, or?
it's one of the things. It's a theme that I've worked with, especially with another project that I think we were going to talk about too. But it's Saint Sebastian, and whenever you look at the Renaissance and paintings from the Renaissance, there's always three-dimensional forms and paintings as well that depict Saint Sebastian. It was usually a guild would pay to have him. Right now, I can't remember what the guild was for him, but like the Masons and everybody had their own pet,
Right.
like St. George or something else. But St. Sebastian was depicted millions of times throughout the Renaissance, since the Renaissance, and he was always depicted like tied up with arrows in him because of he was a Christian. He was a Christian saint.
Yeah,
and,
martyr.
Yeah, the Romans, and he was a martyr, and the Romans shot him with arrows and tied him to a tree. And so there was this depiction, and it always haunted me. And I have to be honest, as many times as I saw it in Renaissance artwork throughout my education, I gravitated more towards the 1968 cover of Esquire magazine, where Muhammad Ali was positioned on the cover by an ad man that a lot of people attribute Mad Men to George Lois, who did those covers in the 60s. And I just loved that cover because it was, number one, Muhammad Ali had a sense of humor. He was in one of the conversations, and George Lois documented all this stuff, and he's been doing a lot of conversations about it. And he just had a show at MoMA of all these covers. But one of the things he said when he was trying to explain to Muhammad Ali what he wanted to do with these arrows, he goes, "George, I'm Muslim." He goes, "That's the best part. You don't understand."
Right, right.
So there was all kinds of dialogue between the two of them, and I've since we had talked about this a little bit before, but I do have a Muhammad Ali project in the city of Benton Harbor where he lived. It's in Benton Harbor and St. Joe, where it's that cover has been recreated in two-dimensional form. It's similar to this Man in the City, only we call it the I Am the Greatest project. And it was set up as a kids' art project, public art piece, similar to what I'm trying to accomplish with the one in the city of Detroit. So to answer your question, way longer than you needed, Seth, that is a depiction of St. Sebastian with the man on the riverfront. And it came about because they were looking in the state park to try and bring public art in. One of the directors at the time, we had a couple conversations, and she's like, let's do it. And I'm like, let's do it. And so it's a pretty good spot, isn't it?
It's one of my
amazing.
favorite pieces, and it's one of
Agreed.
those that really I remember
It's very memorable.
all the time. Yeah, especially with, you've got the Rensen in the background and
The
the
whole
position.
background,
You know,
yeah.
do you think about that? Do you take the surroundings into consideration when you're creating these pieces? Do you know what they're going to be?
In some cases, yes. And I try to be cognizant of it. Sometimes it's, everything's a compromise. So I have the piece, first and foremost, I have the piece in mind. I'm not creating specifically for a certain area, with the exception of depending on how big and, whenever it calls for something like that. But the piece that you're referring to is in Milliken Park, and it's kind of on the, I don't know if that's the southern or easternmost side of Milliken Park, but it's 12 feet, it's stainless steel, it does have the Renaissance in the background. But did either one of you happen to see Drunk History on Detroit maybe about 6 years ago?
I didn't, no.
You can look it up.
Okay.
Drunk History Detroit.
Yeah.
They use it for the introduction.
Oh.
And they interview a guy out in front of Bookies, I think, and I think it was Bookies. And he starts going on about, seeing bands and, Pantera. That's a band, man. And it's like all this stuff. But they're zooming in real slow from a drone onto that while this
Wow.
guy is talking. I still get a little misty when I think about it. And I hate Pantera, and I still get misty. It is so beautiful because this guy is just wasted talking about
Right.
Pantera while they're
is.
zooming in on my sculpture, and I'm like, this is great.
That's
So
art
I had
right
so many friends
there.
call me going, you made Drunk History. I mean,
Yes.
I know. No, the show.
It's every artist's
Yeah.
dream,
It
right?
is. It
I
is.
made it.
Talk also about the Hemingway project.
Oh, so the man took me up north with a group called Cricketry, and Cricketry covers everything from Mackinac Island all the way down to Crystal Mountain. And so they wanted to replicate that. They were doing a show on Detroit, and they had reached out to all Detroit artists that they could get a hold of, and I happened to be one of them. And they said, we want to bring your project up north to celebrate Detroit. And this was probably 5 years ago. While I was up there, I had forgotten that Hemingway started his career up there. He grew up going up there. He lived in Oak Park, summered in Walloon Lake. And just a quick history thing about Hemingway. Grew up there. He got married in Horton Bay. He spent a lot of time, and he married this woman named Hadley when he was 20 years old, right after he got out of World War I. They moved to Paris. The first thing he did, they were in a one-room apartment. He put a map of Michigan. He pinned it on the wall and started writing Nick Adams short stories about Horton Bay, Petoskey, Mansalona, all these places that I was putting sculptures up and having the same conversation. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, at the time he was doing all this, he was traveling, he was all over the world. I mean, he's a pretty amazing character, let alone, I do like his writing. I'm more of a Sun Also Rises type of guy than some of the other ones, but, and I like it because it captured the whole lost generation of Paris. And so I've been a fan, but it was a reignited appreciation for him after finding out more about the Nick Adams and his connections and his love of the outdoors and his love of Michigan and how he got started with all this. And I'm like, now this is about literacy. Now it's about introducing kids to Hemingway, who writes a certain way that changed, by a lot of accounts, changed the way literature was written since the turn of the century there, when he started in the 20s and 30s. And So I was sharing my appreciation with him as an individual, with him as a writer, and with him as the locations that he lived in. Because, you got northern Michigan, which is beautiful, and all the different things that you can equate and make a direct line to all these different places. And then as I was talking to all these people, especially Horton Bay, the first one I put up was right next to the general store, which he wrote about extensively in these Nick Adams stories. And then the Red Fox Inn, it's like they share a driveway. So that was the very first sculpture I put up because I had a conversation with him. He was a great guy. Skip, the guy who runs the general store today still. We have the sculpture right in the middle. And then I met the people across the street at the Dilworth house that he wrote extensively about the blacksmith shop and everything down that street. And they happen to be good friends. We did a fundraiser for the Boyne City Library around Hemingway last year. And I plan to continue with that just because it keeps opening up new opportunities. And Seth, have you ever heard of a little place called Key West?
Yes.
Yeah, he lived there too. There's a Hemingway house there.
There's none of that. There isn't a Key West, Michigan, is there?
Not
There
that
isn't.
I know of.
Okay.
No.
No.
No, there isn't.
There should
Isn't
be.
that funny?
There should be.
Yeah, I never thought of that. There is no Key West, Michigan.
No, there should be.
So what I'm hearing in all of this is it's not just here's a pretty sculpture somewhere or here's a cool looking thing.
I don't think anybody's
This is
ever called me and pretty sculpture in the same sentence. Yeah.
or dynamic or
Okay, that's good.
interesting.
Yeah,
or
those are good
those
adjectives.
Your sculptures are that, but they're really tipping points to conversation, tipping points to learning, tipping points to building community. That's what it all is, and that kind of wraps back up into the idea of public art.
For me,
Yeah.
that's very good, Becky, because I'm a functional illiterate, and everything I've said up until now, I was like, what is he saying? So thank you for that summation, because
no, but I'm listening to all this.
I
and
like that.
That's a fascinating way to illustrate it. It's not, and your passion is so apparent of what you want to get across. You're not an artist sitting in your studio and then you just put it out there and you don't want to deal with anything else. You're really building this whole
Community,
Yeah,
like you said
community.
at the beginning. Well, and to that end, talk about the work that you do with kids. You've touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, since the very beginning of setting up public art projects, it's going on 20 years now, where I took the role as curator and setting up shows. One of the things, like we're talking about, what good is it if you put it up and you
just
don't
walk away.
engage?
Yeah.
And a lot of shows and a lot of people that put money and energy into it think once they put it up, it's over, man. People are going to flock to us. I like to hedge my bets. Plus, what I get out of it is usually from some kid who asks me a question or tells me about a tree fort that he built in the middle of the city of Detroit and the hazards of building a tree fort in the middle of the city of Detroit and what you might find in the morning on your way to school in the tree fort on the way to school or on your way home and it's on fire and and who he met through the tree fort and how many times he stayed there with friends or whatever and these memories and what he created. And I must have asked a million questions about that tree fort. How did you build it? Show me. Draw me a design. Why did you do it this way? Hey, have you thought about this? And it seems like, well, that's an awful lot of work to find out about how to build a tree fort, but it was worth every bit of it. And I wouldn't trade it for anything because that's what I get out of it. And I get to have a conversation. And I don't know if you noticed today, my friend Seth, he's a little paranoid, so he might he would probably relate to this more, but I don't hear a lot of positive things, and it seems like division seems to be a way that's right out there, and I don't like that one. I like to unify. I like to talk to people about cool stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
it's much more satisfying.
anybody else who wants to talk about cool stuff, give me a call. I'm going to Key West, Seth.
Hey,
Let's talk about cool stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and that's,
Nothing cooler than Key West.
That's right. But it's important for kids too because they just want to be heard and listened to. And somebody,
Doesn't everybody want to be
well,
heard?
everybody. We're all kids. I mean, still, like you said, Detroit's a big high school class.
Oh my God, it is so great.
But to let kids see where you are and what you've been able to do, and say like, I could have this dream of stuff that I actually like,
If he can do it,
and then I can actually do it.
I get it's funny because kids say if he can do it, I can do it, and they're really positive about it. Adults are kind of funny though because they go, if he can do it, I can do it. In more of a he's an idiot.
That's nothing.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Whatever.
He doesn't know what he's doing. And I've had people do that to me where they might have had a couple drinks and they share that with me, and I'm like, Well, I know you can, but you're not.
No.
And you probably never will. So have another margarita, cowboy. I wish you would, because we could have
Right,
some
we could
fun.
use that.
But,
Yeah.
and I could really help you out of this funk for you to even approach it that way. Why
Yeah.
not see it for what it is and jump on board? And, I'd help you
Join
with
us.
whatever. But it's it's just so funny. You can see where people are at in any conversation. You can see pretty quickly where people's mindset is. And
Right.
And
The
that's,
growth mindset, or
yeah, or the stagnant
Yes.
one. So, but I will say that the city of Detroit is. Seth, you're new to the city. Don't you find it the same way? People are really welcoming and
Yeah.
said
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
He
Yes.
has said that many times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially, I lived in New England for a while, and New England is not a city, or a place where when you walk by strangers on the street, you don't look them in the eye or say hello and things like that. And by comparison, it's very friendly here.
You got a football coach, owner, right? There in that area.
Well, yes.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
a friendly guy, I heard.
I heard that too.
Yeah.
He likes massages.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't like to pay very well for him, but speaking of creepy.
Yes.
While we're talking about creepy.
Yeah.
So that's a good transition. Let's get back to kids.
Let's get back to
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, wait a second, Seth.
What are the actual programs that you're doing with kids? So what are the?
Well, the one thing I've had some really good educators help me and help put together this program, and it's been 20 years of setting these things up. I worked with the Boys and Girls Club in Oakland County. That was probably where I first had an organized taste of all of this. Oh, and I can't mention my friend's name right now. Man, because I can't remember right now. But she's the greatest, and she had a couple kids. She had 3 kids in the program at the Boys and Girls Club, and so I spent 6 months because I was really passionate about. I had 2 shows that were going up at the time: the one in Birmingham and the one in Brighton, and so she was amazing. She was the start of all this stuff, and it was more of just getting me to start thinking about education and utilizing the art. And we made 40 of these things that were 8 feet tall, and the kids would interpret them. And she was real hands-on because her kids were in it, and she had. Oh, that's me calling Seth.
Hold on.
So-
This is the next guest. Hold on one second.
We'll pause.
We'll pause and edit this out. Hi, Chanel. All right, great. I'm going to send Marvin down to come get you. Apologize. So go on. You were talking about the Boys and Girls Club. And
Yeah, so she was the art director for the kids' art programming at the Boys and Girls Club in Royal Oak, and she got me started with it because her kids were in it. She was really into it.
Sure.
And so they had these 8 foot tall sculptures that one was Wonder Woman, one was a mermaid, and they were really cool. And I'm like, oh, I got to do something with this. And those sculptures, just as a side note, I think are still at that place you throw the axes.
Detroit Axe?
The
Or
one-
no, Foaling. It's
Oh,
Foaling.
the Foaling where
At the
oh,
Foaling
that's
place.
those.
Yeah,
Oh.
those are there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I love that those guys somehow got them out of the Boys and Girls Club, and they put them on display. And I think they're still at the
Nice.
Foaling place, which
Yeah.
I think is really funny. I had people calling me not as much about drunk history as that, but yeah.
Nice.
So then about 10 years ago, I had a friend that I shared all this information with. I had a show of these guys before I put them up in Detroit in Benton Harbor, and that's where this Muhammad Ali thing took place. We had a long conversation, and a friend of mine, Anna Siebert, who is in Benton Harbor, she has a place called ARS Gallery, and she does a lot of stuff with kids. And so we did this whole thing with Muhammad Ali, and she really perfected it. She's got educators that are trained that spend a couple weeks with these kids where they go through the concept to finished design. And we've been doing that for 8 years now. And we truly change lives through that program. And I always get a chance to go in. We've connected with the Ali Center in Louisville.
Oh,
and
wow.
Their director has been up to talk to the kids. We've taken the kids down to see the Ali Center. And their artwork has been on display at the Ali Center as well as throughout the 2 communities. And it's, for me, I've got sculpture up in the community, But when you see a kid with his artwork up in the community,
Yeah, that's changing. Yeah,
especially there was a couple times who the YMCA was their artist in residence for a couple of years, and one of the years we had the work on display at the Scarab Club, which it's kind of a magical place because most people don't even go in there and understand what it is other than it's an art organization. Well, these kids had their artwork in there.
Right.
Wow.
That's kind of a
huge.
transformation, and
Right.
and then they realize they can go anywhere too. That this is
This
not
takes them
something. Yeah,
places.
you can go through the door. This
Yes.
is your place now. You had a show
Yeah.
here. So
That's really
That's
cool.
awesome.
And-
Plus the whole history too. You were saying earlier that a lot of these kids didn't even know Muhammad Ali was from their town, and so then the pride in where they're from. And Benton Harbor has had its share of challenges.
Yes, it has.
But then to have that pride and understand where they come from, it's just this whole cycle of awesomeness. I love it.
Well, thank you. I'm going to take that as the highest form of compliment I've had today.
Oh,
thank you,
good.
Becky. I appreciate it.
Well, one other piece of awesomeness that we have to plug here is the Man in the City experience, which is happening on Thursday, May 16th.
Yeah,
Tell
tell
us
us.
what happens there.
We've been working on this for 4 years. Last year, we had our maiden fundraiser for NSO at Motor City Casino. Unbelievable. It was the most incredible event because everybody was talking, everybody was sharing experiences, and it was all for NSO. So, people left there knowing about NSO. It's an amazing organization. Did I mention it saves lives? Because it truly
Literally, yeah,
saves lives. What I do is nothing compared to what they do. And for them to say, hey, we're going to use your program and just
the
make it the
platform.
theme, I'm the lucky one.
So May 16th, what's going to happen? What can people experience?
This is at the Detroit Golf Club.
You got
That's the
40
cool part.
artists involved.
Yep. So it's May 16th. It's at the Detroit Yacht Club.
Golf
Golf Club.
Did I say?
You
Boat
said
club?
Yacht Club.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to
Go.
make sure it's golf club,
Yeah,
right?
now I
Yeah.
got to change my whole outfit. Yeah, it is the golf club where they're going to have a PGA this year, I think, too,
Yes,
right?
they are.
So there's entertainment, there's art being created around the room. There's I can't remember all the names. Painting with a Twist out of
Oh, yeah. Ferndale.
Ferndale
And Detroit. I think.
and Detroit. Yep, they show up and they have live interactive painting. Sketch Battle, the car designers.
Oh, I love that, yeah.
So Brooke Banham will be designing live. He also designed the Man in the City truck. So there's a
So
lot of different
cool.
items. There's a lot of different artists, and then there's all of the artwork that all of the participating artists have created. We have currently on display that artwork is at your favorite hotels in the city of Detroit for your viewing pleasure, as well as several arts organizations, and it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right.
The-
So-
Lots of previews on the Facebook page I noticed of NSO.
Well, very cool. Well, John, we've got one last thing we want you to do before you get out of here. Are you ready?
Okay, I'll do my
It's
best.
all good.
Oh, sound effects too.
Here we go. Let's start with this. You obviously work and know a lot of the buildings around Detroit. If you could restore any Detroit building, which one would it be?
Well, I think that's currently being done.
Oh.
All the buildings that I have been watching my whole life are being renovated. So I'm going to say, you know what? They're doing a really good job right now.
Dreams do come true. So you've been on a lot of rooftops, which is one of the things I'm very jealous of. What's the best rooftop view in the city?
Okay, well, I have to tell you, this is an international project, and it was up in the city of Windsor. So the best view of the city of Detroit was from the top of the Art Gallery of Windsor, without a doubt. And I have that image a number of times. Actually, we had it up as a billboard for a little while because it was such a cool shot.
Makes sense.
The top of the art gallery came to a point. The man was there, and you could see the whole skyline in the background. A good friend of mine, Aaron Eschenberg, actually took a great photo of it. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
Very cool.
If you could have lunch with any Detroiter, dead or alive, who would it be?
He's not a Detroiter, but he just passed, and he said he wishes he could say it was a Detroiter, and that would probably be Anthony Bourdain.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
so all his specials. I mean, he could have picked somebody better to go along for a ride along, I think. But he was a pretty cool dude, and he had that true sensibility about the city, and I think he grasped it, and I think it was sincere when he said, "I wish I could say I was from Detroit."
If you had a time machine, which moment in Detroit history would you like to go back to?
Today. because
You just live in the present.
it gets better every day. I mean, I know the history pretty well, and I've examined it from a couple of different perspectives and a couple different families. My dad is from Windsor. He's from Belle River. He's Canadian, and my mom grew up in Detroit. She was, I think, third generation, and the whole thing is, I have a good foundation of what everything is, and it's never been better than it is right now.
Ah, wow. Where in Detroit would you go if it was the last day before you died?
Oh boy, Green Dot has $2 beers,
That's a recommendation.
and the food's very good there.
It
too.
is, yeah.
It's your last day on Earth, and you're going to blow all the money you've saved.
Did
up
I
for
say it
your
was $2
career?
for a Bud Light? $2 for a Bud Light. I'd blow every last
Get him
dollar
on.
I had in my pocket.
There
yeah.
you go.
And that's the place to do it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Sculptor and artist John Sauvé. He is the man behind the Man in the City experience, those orange men that you find on top of buildings all over the Detroit area. And the Man in the City experience is happening on Thursday, May 16th, at the Detroit Golf Club. All the proceeds are going to benefit the Neighborhood Service Organization, this fantastic organization that you told us all about. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was great.
You guys are really good at what you do.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for
Thank
continuing
you.
the circle of awesomeness.
Oh,
Yes.
I love
Appreciate
it here.
it.
I'm coming back with Bailey. We're
Yeah.
going to make our announcement.
It's a date.
Let us
yeah.
know. Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. Until then, Detroit's moving.
Keep up.
The debrief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.